We just seen Dune Part 2. What are your thoughts?
Oh, it was good.
Anything else?
Not much more to say about it.
You think they'll be making Dune Part 1?
Doing part one, they had part one already. What the heck?
My anxiety of not knowing if Dune Part 2 would come into existence can now be laid to rest. After an excruciating 3-year wait, I finally got to see if this film lived up to the high expectations that Dune Part 1 set up. I was forced to catch a 10:45 p.m. IMAX screening since earlier screenings were sold out, and I had no intentions of watching it in anything less than IMAX. I came into the theater extremely tired from a long day of work, and being that this film was almost 3 hours long, I was worried that my fatigue would tarnish my enjoyment of it. Thankfully, this was not the case, because this movie absolutely demanded my attention as if a Bene Gesserit was holding a gum jabbar to my neck. My eyes never turned away from the screen, nor did I take any bathroom breaks. I chose to hold on to my water. Unlike some other audience members who felt the need to run to the loo every 10 to 15 minutes, I had the urge to use the voice and yell, "Get back to your seat!" since they would frequently block my view while I was trying to read the Fremen captions. Now, if you haven't read the book or seen the films, I suggest you go do something else because there will be spoilers in this video. I was mesmerized with this movie just as much as I was with Part 1. The first 15 minutes really set the tone that this would be a far more intense film than the previous, and this level of intensity, along with the higher stakes, remains consistent from start to finish. I did not feel like I was watching a PG-13 movie. You can feel the vicious brutality of the hand-to-hand combat and battle scenes. That scene where Lady Jessica drank the water of life and goes into spice agony gave me Exorcist vibes. It was disturbing. The musical score helped amplify the weight of these moments even further. One of my gripes about Part 1 was that Hans Zimmer's score would often overpower the sound effects and dialogue. The audio mixing seems much more balanced this time around. I'm not saying anything was turned down. In fact, the music and sound effects seemed like they got turned up a notch. There was much more power and bass that I could actually feel in my chest during the IMAX screening. At times, Hans Zimmer's score felt like an extension of the sound effects. Now, it would take me a whole separate video just to gush about the visuals. Frank Herbert's vision of Planet Arrakis has come to life in full splendor. Greg Fraser has proven once again that he's one of the best cinematographers in Hollywood. Every single frame of film of this movie would make for a great portrait or poster. The desert feels more immersive and dangerous. When I first saw the trailer, I was worried that the black and white scenes in Gidi Prime were made to scale back on the blood and avoid an R rating, similar to what they did in Kill Bill Volume 1. This was not the case, because in actuality, the planet's black sun limited the environment's color to black and white. I thought it was ingenious how they played around with those visuals, using infrared cameras to create this effect. Another major highlight of Dune Part 2 are the action sequences. Those who complain about Dune Part 1 being too slow should get their fill here. This is by far Denis Villeneuve's most action-heavy film to date. Most of the action set pieces were exclusive to the movie and not in the source material. I'm convinced that if Denis Villeneuve filmed a Dune movie with original content, he would knock it out of the ballpark. And you can't have great action sequences without having top-notch special effects. This movie ran on a budget that was about half of the most expensive Fast and Furious sequel, yet it still manages to look 10 times the amount actually spent, using a combination of practical effects, real sets, and some CG. This is movie magic on full display, and should signal to Hollywood that it takes just a visionary filmmaker to make a quality blockbuster. I was overwhelmed by the scene where Paul rides the sandworm. I have to admit that I got a bit teary-eyed by the sheer enormity of it. I've never seen anything like this on film since the Star Wars opening shot and the first time seeing the Jurassic Park dinosaurs. The casting and performances are just the cherry on top of this movie's sundae, or even better, the popcorn inside the sandcrotch. Before Florence Pugh was cast as Princess Irulan, I really wanted Anya Taylor-Joy to play the role. She ended up in a cameo playing an older Alia, which worked out even better. I honestly can't think of anyone else playing that part, and hope she gets a bigger role in Dune Messiah. Florence Pugh was a perfect Princess Irulan. We didn't get to see much of her either, but I also expect to see her take a bigger role in Dune Messiah. I thought Christopher Walken did a pretty good job playing a feeble but arrogant version of the Emperor. He reminded me of the wizard in the Land of Oz, because we were expecting a ruler that was strong and intimidating. I was disappointed that he didn't really get a chance to flex his acting chops. I'm not sure if they'll bring him back for Dune Messiah, but it would be nice. Timothée Chalamet was excellent as usual. Watching him dial up his performance as he ascends from Paul to Muad'Dib and then to Emperor is some powerful stuff. Javier Bardem continues to be the perfect Stilgar, and we get to see his character shine in part 2. He provides some much-needed comedy relief to fill the void Duncan Idaho left behind. Rebecca Ferguson's portrayal of Lady Jessica really surprised me. She comes off as devious and extremely sinister. I was not expecting that from her this early in the Dune timeline. In some moments she felt like a secondary villain. My favorite part of David Lynch's Dune would have to be Sting's portrayal of Fade Rotha. I love how he brought that rock star element to the character. And just like Sting, Austin Butler's portrayal of Fade Rotha steals the show. He manages to retain some of that rock star swag while being even more of a psychopath. That scene where he randomly stabs a Harkonnen servant to death was brutal, and reminiscent of that scene in Blade Runner 2049 where Jared Leto stabs and kills a newly created replicant. I wonder if this was Denis Villeneuve's way of paying homage to his earlier film. Austin Butler is clearly a rising superstar in Hollywood, just like Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya. When I think of Dune Part 2, the first character that comes to mind is Fade Rotha. For these characters to share the screen with the likes of Christopher Walken, Javier Bardem, Jessica Ferguson, Dave Bautista, and Josh Brolin is nothing short of amazing. This is the type of cast you would expect to see in a Tarantino or Scorsese movie, not a sci-fi epic. It's a great time to be a Dune fan, and we are getting spoiled. And with all this praise, I do have some quibbles with the film, and this might be where my ego as a book reader rears its ugly head. I'd say that Dune Part 2 dials back on the source material much more than Part 1 did, and I can say that I was on board with some of the changes Denis Villeneuve made. The biggest and most controversial decision was not to include young Alia in the film. Near the end of the novel, she was about 2 to 3 years old. Reason being was that there was a time jump after Paul and Lady Jessica get taken in by the Fremen. During that time period, Lady Jessica gives birth to Alia, and Paul establishes his importance as leader to the Fremen people. Chani becomes pregnant and gives birth to their first son, Leto. In the novel, and even the miniseries, a toddler-age Alia communicates like a fully grown adult. In Part 2, she telepathically communicates with Lady Jessica as a fully sentient fetus that has all the knowledge of a Bene Gesserit mother. This change also affects how the Baron Harkonnen is killed. In Part 2, Paul extracts his revenge and slays the Baron. In the book, it's Alia that kills the Baron with a poisoned needle. While Paul avenging his father's death feels more satisfying, how Alia kills the Baron is an important component that ties into the third book, Children of Dune. I get the impression that Denis Villeneuve has no desire to complete the trilogy of the book series, which is unfortunate because I think Children of Dune would make for an excellent transition to the big screen. And these changes might be why I felt the third act of the film felt rushed. There was a lot more moving pieces that led to the climax in the book. For instance, Paul's son Leto is killed by the Emperor Sardaukar attack on a Fremen outpost. Alia is also captured and taken to the Emperor. This makes for a much more dramatic finale than what we got on screen. Another major shift from the novelization is a change in Chani's attitude towards Paul. In the book, Chani stands by Paul's side despite his marriage to Princess Urulan. She understands the marriage is for political reasons and remains his concubine and true love. She does not become cynical and run away from him in protest. Thufir Hawat's role in the film is also completely eliminated. There is no mention of what happened to his character during the invasion. Rumor is that his scenes were filmed but removed from the final cut. There was also no mention of Chani's relation to Liet Kynes. In the book, we find out that Liet Kynes is her father, which would make that character Chani's mother in the film adaptation. Definitely a missed opportunity not including that in the movie. The Dune novelization is often perceived as a hero's journey, with the story ending with a victorious Paul Atreides. Some people even accuse the story of following a white savior trope. Frank Herbert subverted these perceptions of Paul's character when he released Dune Messiah. Reception to that book turned out to be quite divisive, with many fans not liking the direction the author went with Paul's character. Frank Herbert mentioned in interviews that he always intended Dune to be a cautionary tale of what happens when people worship charismatic leaders. Dune Part 2 differs from the book in that the film starts gearing up for Paul's descent into being a dangerous leader early on. We also see some hints of a potential clash between Chani and Paul, which never happens in Frank Herbert's Dune saga. I was initially surprised with this change in tone, but completely understand why it was done. If the film ended with Paul proven to be the chosen one, audiences not familiar with the books would probably feel betrayed in the next installment. We also see Paul command the launch of a jihad, or holy war, as mentioned in the film. This also does not occur until Dune Messiah. I was a bit put off with the final shot of the film, showing Chani mean-mugging the camera like, "This rich bitch just stole my man." It felt sort of like a half-baked cliffhanger. I don't know where they're going with this, but I put my trust in Dennis. Despite my minor complaints of Dune Part 2, Dune Part 1 and 2 as a whole is a cinematic masterpiece that I personally think is on par, or even better than, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Denis Villeneuve successfully did the impossible by managing to preserve Frank Herbert's complex and intricate core themes into a close to 6-hour sci-fi epic. This film could not be released at a more perfect time, because so much of that story's narrative can be viewed as an allegory to current events in the world. Everything from our current political landscape to Ukraine and Russia, Israel and Palestine, environmental concerns, chaos and destabilization, so many similar elements can be found in Dune. That might be the reason why this film is striking such a nerve with moviegoers. Who knows how our lives will be by the time Dune Messiah is released. And that's all I have for today. Please hit that like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next page.
Your name?
I don't know. I don't know what my name is.
Your name, sir?
Don Juan.